Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, when there's something out there that's stylish, scary, and makes you think, it's kind of the total package for us, and if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals, and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more, in a light and in a conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to assume that you do. You can give us the old like and subscribe. Give us that 5-star rating, subscribe to the podcast. You can find us over at Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, basically wherever you get your podcasts. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we'd really appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to follow us on the social media, as the kids call it. You can find us on the Facebook, the Twitter, and the Instagram at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, I'm a broken record because I say this all the time, but it's the truth. Please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, film festivals, video on demand, basically the moving image at large, because if we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please pay us a visit. On this episode, we've got a real interesting one. It's a new film, hit VOD, video on demand platforms like Apple and whatnot, this past Friday, from our friends over at IFC Midnight, or IFC, depending on how you want to use the terminology, but it's a little bit of elevated horror, as the kids call it. It's called A Banquet, and it's the story of a mother played by Sienna Guillory who is really put to the test when her daughter insists that she has experienced something supernatural, and she's left her body in service of a higher power. And it's really playing with a lot of interesting themes of sort of coming of age and growing up, but also dipping its toe into sort of horror and sci-fi motifs as well. And it's really an exquisitely designed and really a really sort of quietly spooky film. Like I said, it's got Sienna Guillory, Jessica Alexander, the fantastic Lindsay Duncan in it. It's a fantastic piece of British cinema and a little bit of British elevated horror, as it will, and they have such a good reputation on that end as well. But we had the distinct pleasure of sitting down talking with director Ruth Paxton about how the script came across her desk, sort of the origins of the film, sort of the conscious decisions they made in sort of the design of it all, and sort of crafting a piece of cinema that sort of plays in genre but plays outside of genre all at the same time. It's really an interesting film, and I do recommend you can either check it out for purchase or rental on platforms like iTunes or Google or whatever your video on demand platform of choice is. But first, enjoy our talk with Ruth, because between you and me, it's a pretty good one.
Well, obviously, Ruth, just first off, thank you so much for the time today. Really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Now, congratulations on the movie. I absolutely loved it. Now, it obviously plays on so many different levels, but I love the idea of sort of adding sort of issues of mental health around, people growing up, around the end of the world, around all these sort of things to sort of combine them in a very sort of psychological horror movie. And I love that you didn't show that much gore. It was very much sort of implied and very much in our heads. My first question for you is, like, how did this ultimately become your first feature? Like, walk me through your reaction when you saw the script and sort of be like, okay, I can do this.
So it was definitely a curveball that came, that kind of a career curveball that came in. And it was off the back of like a general meeting with Leonora, the producer, just talking about what I was working on, what she was working on, in light of the fact that I typically write what I direct. But she talked about this script. She pitched it as a film that sat somewhere in the mix of Hereditary, Take Shelter, and Rosemary's Baby, and that in itself really piqued my interest because I love those movies. And then I wanted to read it. The themes and this is, I guess, the general pitch for it, the synopsis for it was of interest. Read it the same day, loved it, but it was the point where it hit the P scene, where the P scene takes place, that I knew I really, really, really wanted to direct it. So there was loads of questions I had, and there was a development process that we went through, but the P scene was just so charged. And it's, you know, it's not a horror scene. It's a scene about a serious power struggle between a mother and daughter, and I guess another daughter on the periphery, that's set at a dinner table. It's in many ways quite unremarkable, but I knew how I could shoot it in such a way that it would feel like a horrific atmosphere to be involved in. So it was that. But beyond that, like, I loved the relationships. That's what, as a director, you know, I was excited about doing with the development of the script with Justin, and also on, you know, with the cast to create these characters, was I just knew I recognized these women, and I knew that I could like enrich and deepen their characterization with my experience. So in a way, it's like, it sounds arrogant, but I was just so confident I could do a good job of it. And it's really one of the first scripts I've read that I felt that way about, considering, you know, I'm generally the author of them, and that's where that confidence come from.
Now, I mean, these characters are so distinct, and I mean, everyone sort of carves their own space, and you have to find sort of actors who can sort of live up to that kind of material. Can you walk me through the casting process on your end, just to try to find the right people for the right parts? Because, I mean, in many ways, this is where the big part of your job has to happen, right? You've got to find the right, the casting is so key.
Well, there's that cliche, isn't there? 90% of the director's job is, and, you know, it is. I mean, obviously there's a hell of a lot else to do, but, you know, if you cast right, everything else will fall into place, I think. And I am really, really pleased with the decisions I made. That sounds really self-congratulatory, but I say this, and it's true. I'm so proud of the jobs each of them did. I just feel, and that we, you know, the world we built together. And so, you know, it was obvious to me that it was important to cast Holly first. I only saw Sienna for that role. Her name came up repeatedly, and I knew her work, but I didn't know, like, I'm not like a big Resident Evil fan. I hadn't seen all of those. I knew who she was though, and I loved her look. The unusual circumstance of meeting her was that we were able to do it just prior to the first lockdown in the UK. So I actually got to meet her in the flesh, and she is the only cast member that I got to meet. The rest was all cast and auditioned, you know, virtually. And so when I met her, I just knew very instinctively that she was Holly. And the other thing was I just really liked her. I felt very drawn to her, and I felt like I could be myself with her, and that I could share, you know, of myself, and that she would share of herself. And that's kind of the bedrock for me of a good relationship when it comes to working with actors, is like, are you going to be really honest with me? And are you going to be cool with me being really honest with you? And, you know, I also knew that in casting Holly, I thought it was really important that the actor be a mum, because I'm not. And while I can, you know, I can understand that relationship from the outside, I can make choices and decisions about how I think that relationship might work. I just thought that it was important that one of us have children and have that kind of, you know, physical, I guess, and loving link to their own kids. So she was kind of she was just very instant choice. And then with Isabel, who was played by Ruby Stokes, I saw her early on. I originally saw her for the role of Betsey, but she wasn't Betsey because she was Isabel, if that makes sense. So it was like, no, I know who you are. And even though we did have to do the process online, and that's just not ideal, she came, literally transcended the screen for me. There was just something, she had an amazing quality and a beautiful quality as well. And then Betsey was a longer journey. I ended up seeing a lot of young women for Betsey, and just, you know, it was a long journey to find who she was. And I think that was in part because Jessica, who plays her, is really not what I was looking for. So she's, physically not, she didn't look like Betsey in my mind. And she has a sort of a different kind of a presence. Like she's a very confident performer. And I mean, one of the things that I was really drawn to was her quality of voice. She has a really deep quality of voice. And I found her really, I suppose, like powerful. And that's what I wanted Betsey to be, you know, was a character that could become very influential and powerful. And, you know, she kind of, the minute I saw her, I was like, oh, well, that's her. And that's what you want, you know, you want to be kind of told to cast the person. And that's kind of what happened. So it was amazing. And then with Lindsay Duncan playing June, she was dream casting. She was, you know, I absolutely love that woman. And I didn't know her before, but I'm a huge fan of the HBO season Rome. And that's probably one of my most rewatched things. And so she's a big player in that. She's also originally Scottish. I really, really wanted her to do it. And she said she would. So it was a great gift.
There's such duality with all these characters, because I mean, Sienna really brings this sort of, you know, strength beget fragility and warmth to the role, while Lindsay is almost the polar opposite of her, and they're both sort of going in the same direction and have to pass alongside each other almost in this journey. How important was it? I guess just like, are you somebody who wants to rehearse? Like, do you do a lot of read-throughs, or do you try to let them find it in the moment kind of thing?
The latter. So, I mean, we weren't afforded much rehearsal time. So for a start, and that's a combination of COVID related issues, and also just, it was a really, really low budget film, you know? So there was any rehearsal time I did have, or on the phone, or, you know, in communication with the cast, was really just, it wasn't really talking about the material. It was more talking about ourselves and, you know, who we were as people. I wanted to kind of get an overview of how these women's brains worked and how their feelings worked, and, you know, the experiences they'd had. And so we kind of built trust and a dynamic doing that. And then on the day, I like to be flexible with the material. So we would do a read through or a line read. And if it didn't sound right, we would reshape it together. And that was a very collaborative process. And I loved I love suggestions. I love when when an actor says to me, I'm just not getting it, doing it this way. I think if I do it this way, it'll be better. And if that works for them, then that's so exciting. So it's a pretty flexible environment, but also forced, because there wasn't, I mean, if I did have loads of time to rehearse, I would never rehearse scenes. The only time I might do that would be if there were like specific choreography or complications or things we really had to plan out, or you know, I suppose spots we really needed to hit. But otherwise, I feel, you know, if I'm confident in the material, I know we'll find the way. And I work with a cinematographer that I've worked with for over a decade now. So, you know, we have a very sophisticated shorthand. We're very in tune with each other, so we can respond quite quickly to choices made at the last minute.
For sure. No, and I mean, that leads me to want to ask about just the family house, because I mean, I was so struck by sort of the production design in the film, and we really had this cold environment, but still had these pockets of warmth in it as the characters are having to go through their stories. And I mean, like, was it a house? Did you find the house, or was it something you had to build? Because it felt very, I mean, almost in a way that, like you referenced Rosemary's Baby, it felt like one of those houses. It really had this aura to it, and it was a character unto itself.
That's great to hear. And I always knew I wanted the location to be memorable and influential, I guess. So it wasn't a build. It was, I mean, we far off the money to do that for sure. But like, it wasn't a first choice. I mean, we pre-production was compromised in many ways because of COVID, but one of the most significant was the hunt for a location. There was not a lot of options. And I wanted the house to offer a lot, basically. It was going to be a space that we were going to be in for a long time. And I mean, it's not a long film, but still, you don't want an audience to get bored in the same space. So I needed it to be somewhere that we could like really explore and go from filming in a way where it felt like a safe place to be to becoming a really unsafe place to be. So that was you know, paramount for me in looking for this space, but so was it being unique. You know, I want things to be beautiful and unique, and I wanted this family to live in a unique house. And I had in mind, I'd been watching loads of Ozark at the time, and I loved how this house was like a sort of really familiar, their house, was like a family, a really domestic, familial mid-century building. And it had a lot of glass, and yet it was home to a really, really, really sort of disturbed, kind of dysfunctional family unit, and that was really sort of prevalent for me. So we were looking for mid-century properties, and then this one came up, and at first it seemed like such an obvious choice. It had this incredibly bizarre labyrinth-like layout with entrances and exits all over, so there was no one point of entry. It had this beautifully cinematic massive window that you could literally watch the family drama play out through on either side. And for me, what I loved was it had this almost like amphitheater-like setting. So that space that connects the living area to the kitchen it felt like a stage. And when you think about that opening scene and Betsey watching it, I thought this just is going to set up this sense that this is a stage where this family's drama is going to unfold. And further to that, it reminded me of the ice rink, and there was loads of things about it that were like, yes, this feels great. But there was compromises to be made. Like the kitchen was very small. There wasn't a room in the house that could function as Holly's bedroom, so I had to tailor the script to fit that. And Betsey's room, while it works, we would have loved to have had a bit more control with that space, because we spend so much time in that room and it becomes such a horrible and dark place to be, that, for example, a build for that room would have been wonderful, because we could have put our camera in so many more places. But really it was like shooting in a bedroom, which is what you do when you're a student, and it's compromising.
Right.
But I think, on the whole, I think the house has been a real gem in the in the film's crown, because everybody loves it, everybody's commenting on it, and the production designers did an amazing job. But production designer Sophia Stocco and her team did an amazing job on a really limited budget. And I know that on my insistence, the majority of their money went on painting this space, which had been a very white, modern, open, fresh and airy space, and I needed it to be the very opposite of that. So we needed to paint it a really, really dark color and make it feel less like that there were shadows to hide in, basically pockets for fear to lurk.
No, I mean, I guess just to put a bow on this, I mean, I think the thing for me that stands out with this is that it plays in sort of the ambiguous areas and the gray areas. It's much more about the journey than the destination. For you as a storyteller, how is it? Is it a challenge to build something where it's not like, especially in a horror movie, where typically horror movies build to the reveal? There isn't necessarily a reveal here. It's more about the reveal is more like an onion peeled back in sort of the journey to get towards the end.
I think the way I saw it was a journey to a release.
Yeah.
So I knew the sensibility I wanted the ending to have, and the feeling I wanted the audience to have. I'm not telling the audience what to think, but I definitely wanted the audience to feel relief, to feel some kind of euphoria, some kind of respite from what had become an incredibly claustrophobic, toxic space to be in. And to answer your question, I didn't, my brand of horror, and I'm not saying I'm a horror director, but a lot of the work I've made is pretty horrific, is about anxiety and dread. And it's about that sense of doom. Yeah. I feel like my short work has all been about honing how I direct a sense of impending doom. So from my perspective, it was something that just comes, I don't know if this sounds stupid or not, but it comes naturally. And so that part of it was easy for me to do. The fun parts were dipping into the body horror and the gore and that kind of stuff that I'm less used to doing. But yeah, that was fun. The ambiguous stuff, I mean, a lot of that's crafted in the edit as well, to be fair, and there was, we didn't drop scenes, we definitely reordered scenes, and it was a process, it was a long process, but I know that feeling of anxiety, and it's a big part of why I make work and how I make work and what I try to understand better about living. And so it's familiar territory, I guess.
Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of your style of anxiety and doom, because it just feels honest and it feels that much more terrifying. And I mean, I think you've made an absolute hell of a film. And I just want to say thank you for the time today.
No, thank you. And thanks for your compliments. It means a lot. And thank you for watching and for all your thoughts.
You're very welcome, Ruth. Thanks again.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. All right.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.